to you today. And this is just an awesome opportunity that we have each week to meet in freedom. That's an awesome privilege. Amen. We trust you to trust God with your finances. Now, if you're just joining us, we are at the end of a series called Real Talk, Getting to the Heart of the Matter. And so we've been talking a lot about communication. And I've been listing out some basic skills this month of effective listening, self-disclosure, and then communicating using whole messages, not leaving things out, being true to what you're feeling and communicating that. And we've also been providing opportunities both at the service for like a group exercise, and then we've also provided some handouts to take home and practice on your own. I'm really under the belief that like with any skill, you really have to practice it, and you have to practice it often or regularly for it to become automatic. We're going to communicate. You've been communicating probably your whole life. And if you're like any of us, you probably have had some relationship issues because of communication skills or maybe a deficiency. And so this is a course you probably didn't get in high school or even at your workplace or any seminars. In church, we kind of talk about it without talking about it. But this month, I really felt like we needed to have a course. And so this is something for each one of us to grow in these skills. Now, we have been doing basic skills, okay? Today, I'm going to give you an advanced skill. And this is something that if you're ready to take your communication up to a whole nother level, you'll want to tune into this message because this will be something that will really enhance your communication. So not only think you're saying with your words or vocally, but this will be something that'll bring the whole message together. And so the message I have for you today is titled, The Body Tells a Story Too. Do not forget, your body tells a story too. And today our advanced communication skill is our body language, okay? So look at your body. You have one, you have feet, you have hands perhaps. You have a body and it is communicating too. And so we're going to hone in on what we can learn about body language and this skill that is involved here, because it is a skill that we learn. So the question I have as we begin is, what story is your body telling? You ever had that question asked? What story is your body telling? Because you can't not communicate. That's not an option. You're going to communicate. And without making a sound, you reveal some of your feelings and attitudes, and people can catch those through the use of your body language. For example, your smile says, I'm happy. Your frown says, I'm sad. Your arms say, I'm mad. And your fingers drumming, I don't know if any of you guys are doing this right now, but your fingers drumming and your explosive, it says, I'm impatient. Let's get moving. Okay, so your body's saying things, whether you know about it or not. And of course, when you're called out on it, because somebody may point it out, like I've had that pointed out to me sometimes, and you won't have a clue what they're talking about because you just don't even know that you're doing it. And even when you show nothing, your closed off stances, your refusal to speak even, and you're not saying, I'm not even going to communicate, even that communicates. It says, I don't want to talk about it and leave me alone. Now, if you have a teenager or a young child, that's not a basic skill. It's because you can't see it. You rely on other people to tell you this. And let me tell you, people don't tell you this. You have to look, if you had a mirror and that followed you throughout the day, or maybe a video camera, you may be able to pick up on these things. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We rely on other people's feedback, and honestly, it's just not something that people share with us unless they really know us well. So this is an advanced skill because you have to figure out, how do I get this information from other people and how do I get better at this? The thing is we also think that we're hiding too. Like we think we're like more clever than we are. And if I don't tell them how I really feel, that somehow they're not going to pick up those messages. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Reality is that we can throw up smoke screens even and try to camouflage our messages, but our body tells on us often. And it's hard to get away from that. Our verse today that is something I think that shares a lot of information. Just a short proverb is Proverbs 16:30. And it says this: whoever winks his eyes plans dishonesty or dishonest things. He who purses his lips brings evil to pass. Let me say that again because I kind of messed that up, didn't I? Now, whoever winks his eyes plans dishonest things. He who purses his lips brings evil to pass. It's one of those ones you have to kind of say over and over until you get what it's saying. There's another translation I found was helpful. It's from the Voice translation, which I wouldn't recommend just reading that. I'd read a translation that's, like NIV, NLT. ESV is the one I use primarily, NASB, those. But then this is like, oh, okay, what is it saying in a different way? Like the Message and the Voice translations do that well. And it says this: body language can expose a person's intentions. Wow, like that really says it clear, doesn't it? Okay, body language can expose a person's intentions. Whoever winks the eye is planning perversity. Whoever purses his lips is intent on evil. What is it saying? It's saying that the body is communicating something. And so we can find some of their intentions on their body language. Now, this is different than mind reading. We're not supposed to read into people's thoughts. That's not what we're doing. It's simply noticing that the Bible says that the body is going to tell a story. Now, the Bible draws attention to many of these nonverbal forms of expression, and especially those involving the hands or the feet. We call them gestures. We use them all the time, and in the biblical days, they used them as well. For example, the book of Ezekiel records God commanding the prophet Ezekiel to gesture by clapping his hands and stomping his feet. So part of his message to the people involved these gestures. And so I'll read this verse and demonstrate. Ezekiel 6:11 says, "Thus says the Lord God, clap your hands, stomp your feet, and say, alas, because of all the evil abominations of the house of Israel. For they shall fall by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence." Now, in our day, clapping would signify applause, right? You wouldn't just clap to signify something that's bad. But in biblical times, gestures, like that can be used for different meanings. And that's actually something we need to pay attention to when we're reading the Bible, is that the same gesture may have different meanings. And so we need to look at the context and when we see these things happening. Now, the gesture of clapping is a good example of this because we usually understand clapping as a positive, applause, that we're rewarding somebody. But in biblical times, we see not only the same meaning of this gesture as applause in some verses and praise, but also clapping as used as negative reactions such as anger, revulsion, and even contempt or derision. So I'll give a few of these examples up on the screen for you to see. So we see they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." So we see applause. "Clap your hands, all you people. Shout to God with loud songs of joy." So it's an act of praise. That's why you might see in some of our praise songs that we clap. I don't know if this church is on rhythm or tempo. I'm certainly struggle with that. But clapping, as we see it, as praising and in singing. Then we see in other ones something different. And Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. A gesture that he made that communicated his anger. And then we see in Ezekiel, "Behold, I strike my hand at the dishonest gain that you have made." Like, oh my, revulsion. I can't believe that you're doing that. And it shows him by clapping his hands together. And then in Job, when he's talking about the wicked, he says, it claps its hands at him and hisses at him from its place. So it's a negative, like, look at what you're doing, the evil things you're doing. And so in the Bible, we can see that same gesture, it's used different ways. So when reading people clapping in a Bible verse, we should realize that we need to look at the different possible meanings and gestures and see which best fits. Now, you can go through the Bible. We could spend our time today looking at body language in the Bible, but that's not my purpose today. Today is about skills. It's about getting better at this obvious truth that our body is going to tell on us. It's going to tell a story. And we probably should look at that because we don't want to let our words say something that our body's disagreeing with. We want to try to bring it all into one so we can better communicate to others. Now, there's two primary ways that we communicate without making a sound. The first is with body movements, such as facial expressions, your gestures, and even your posture. That's one of the first ways, is our body movement. So think about, everybody move your body. Maybe do the wave. Your body is moving. Rub your shoulders together, or kind of loosen up, get relaxed. You're communicating with your body movements. The second one is your spatial relationships, meaning like how much distance you put between you and yourself and the other person. So it's these two different things, your body movement and the space that you choose to have between somebody when you're speaking. Have you guys ever had those close talkers? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Maybe you're the close talker. Okay, if you're close enough for me to spit on you, it's like, hey, back up a little bit. So good like arm distance is kind of my rule. But for those I really know, maybe I'll get closer. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about these a little bit more later. But there's basically two primary ways, your body movements and then the distance you put between others. Now, body language is a big deal. Why? Because 50% of what you communicate is body language, and it makes an impact on your message. So if you want your message to be heard, get your body in movement around your message. So body language not only conveys more information than words, but is often more believable than what we say. For example, if you have a spouse, and if you don't have a spouse, maybe if you have a teenager or a friend, you can say that. But let's say your spouse, your friend, your teenager you say, "What's wrong?" And she shrugs her shoulders and frowns, and then kind of turns away from you and says, "Oh, nothing, I guess. I'm fine." Now, what would you believe more? Her words or her body? Her body language, right? You don't believe her words for a minute. You're like, something's up. What's going on? And then you kind of like are trying to investigate, okay, what's really going on here? Because I don't think you're just fine. Now, the key to interpreting body language, though, is often congruence or sameness, where we're looking for the messages to match. And so when they don't, like that example I just used, you're like, what's going on here? Now, our kids, they like to play matching games like memory, where you flip over and you try to find the match. Anybody played that game? It's a fun game to play with kids, and they get very good at it. I'm surprised. I'm slow at reacting, and I lose more often than I win, at least in our household. And it's a good thing that we learn. And from a young age, we kind of have this pattern recognition of others, of when something's not matching and when they are matching. And so when it comes to communication, we do this all the time when we're like, hey, what's going on? Something's different. And we don't necessarily know what words to put on it. We just know that something's not matching here. And this is where you can use those basic skills that I've already talked about in helping and interpreting and recognizing these patterns when they're not congruent, they're not the same. Because you're listening, you're like, I'm hearing what you're saying, but what your face says something different. You don't seem, it doesn't seem to match, and you're able to be more effective at communicating. Now, body movements, I think you're ahead of me on this. I'll talk about that in a moment. Go to the one that says illustrative. There we go. Illustrators and regulators. All right, there we go. So body movements have kind of two main purposes that we use them for. So one is illustrative. So if you've noticed, I use my hands a lot, and it's to illustrate. I do it all the time, whether I'm on the phone or whether I'm talking to somebody in person, whether I'm speaking. And I'll always be using my hands to talk. Now, why would I do that? It's to illustrate what I'm saying. For example, like if you're at the deli at Walmart or Pick and Save, and you look at the array of food, and let's say there's a lot of different pastas, you'll say, I want that one. But what else might you do to help them know which one you're talking about? Okay, the teenager in here got it. She's like, you point. You don't want the wrong thing. I want that pasta, not that one. I want this one. And if they get the wrong one, you clarify, say, no, I want this one. And you really have to help them. But your body language is to illustrate what you're saying. And so we do this by pointing and all sorts of gestures that we use. Now, something about gestures is these are things that you just learn. Growing up, whether it's the home that you grow up in or the people that you're around, the friendship groups that you have, you kind of pick up on how to say things. Like, for example, when my wife, and if you say this, I'm sorry, we're in Wisconsin, but she'll say the word bagel. Okay, why don't you guys say that word with me? Say bagel. Say it loud. Bagel. Okay, somebody said it. Bagel. Okay, you guys ever notice that people in Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan say that? I do, because I'm from Kansas. We don't say bagel, we say bagel. In Indiana, they got on me for saying pillow. Pillow. They're like, it's not, it's pillow. You know, I'm probably even saying it wrong. I can't say it the way that they say it. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, you don't need to like get more complicated than that. You learn it through training, and you don't think about it. It's just stuff that you learn. Another difference is like cultural differences is a big one. So eye contact or maintaining eye contact when you're talking to an authority figure, in America, that's a sign of respect. You're looking them in the eye or her in the eye, and you know that's a sign of saying I respect your authority. But in Puerto Rico, they would look away to show respect, because if you look at your authority figure and you make eye contact with them, they pick that up as disrespectful. And there's all sorts of differences that we could see in different cultures, but the important thing is gestures are going to be interpreted differently, and so that's something just to be aware of that may not be the same for everybody. It's also not the same for individuals. So if you get to know somebody, like I've gotten to know some of you, but when you get to really know somebody, you can pick up when they're in a bad mood, can't you? Like they don't need to say anything, and nobody else knows about it, but you can be like, hey, what's wrong? You know, have you ever noticed that? Like, not everybody can pick up on that, but when you get to know somebody, you pick up on their differences and their gestures that they use. And so that's our individual uniqueness. And then we have some cultural stuff that we pick up on. Body movements, though, can serve several communication purposes. Besides, indicating attitudes and conveying feelings, body movements can also serve as these illustrator and regulators. Now, we're going to do a group exercise. We're actually going to do 2 today because this is something you can only learn by practicing with someone else. Now, are you guys ready? Because I want to prepare you guys for a good group experience. Now, this first group experience, you're going to find a partner. It can be somebody you're right next to. It can be somebody across the room. I think it's good to kind of mix and match, but for this first one, just pick a partner. Anybody can do. And then what you're going to do is you're going to discuss a topic that brings joy. So pick a happy topic. So it could be a funny story. It could be a touching story, maybe that you heard. It could be a testimony of what you've been through. But it's something that the purpose is to elicit joy, a smile, okay? But here's the thing. This is the catch. Because we've talked about gestures and body movements. While you're doing that, I don't want you to move your body. Like from here down, try not to move it. Don't use your hands. Don't use, don't move your body like this. Just tell the story. And you can use facial expressions, and the more the merrier for that. So you can smile and try to communicate. But just try it, because I want you to notice how much you rely on these gestures, okay? So pick somebody. I'll give you guys 2 minutes. Share something joyful. Allow the other person to share too. And then if you guys run out of time, talk about like, what was that like, to not use your body while you're communicating, okay? So there's not going to be a timer on here, but if you guys want to get on up and find a partner, if you're watching online, you can do that too. Find somebody to practice this skill with. All right, you guys can finish up. Now, for many of you, that was just way too awkward. It was hard. For me, it was very hard to just sit there and not share using my hands. And I give you that just to show you your dependence on using gestures. And your facial expression, though, you were able to get a lot of information if you're listening just by their facial and their tones and all that stuff. But the gestures were missing, and it was noticeable. I was even looking around, and I could see you're using a lot of nodding and trying to be more, more eccentric in your facial expressions. So we're going to do one more exercise in a little bit here, but I want to just talk a little bit more on body movements and go a little bit more in depth in this. So this is Body Movements 101, and there's 4 areas here that we're talking about when we're talking about body movements. First one is facial expressions, and this is the most expressive part of your body language. The face is the primary source for information. When you're looking at somebody, you're primarily looking at different points in their face to try to see and pick up on their moods or attitudes. It's very important if you're negotiating with people or your kids. You want to kind of quickly scan and know what's going on, at least getting an idea. You can't know everything, but it gives you really helpful information. You can also pick up, like we talked about earlier, contradictions and inconsistencies of the message by their facial expressions, and if their voice is matching or it's not matching. Another one was the gestures. And gestures are the clapping of the hands, the stomping of the feet. So your arms and your hands, and then the legs and the feet. We've talked a lot about the arms, but those are kind of the gestures that we tend to think of. But you also have ones on your lower half, your body, that you do that you may not notice. Now, these are not things that you're deliberately choosing, and so sometimes it's awkward to know this about yourself. Some of you don't want to know this about yourself, and I get it. But these are things, nonetheless, that when people are talking to you, they're picking up and noticing. For example, on your feet, you could have all sorts of things happening, where you're crossing your leg, you're shaking your foot, or you're, like for me, when I'm at the table, like I constantly shake my knee, which some people ask me all the time, are you nervous? Or I'm like, no, I just shake my knee. It's just something I do. But it's not just your legs too. You scratch your head, when you're kind of confused about something. You may scratch your nose or your ear, when you're kind of wanting to jump in and interrupt in a conversation. Even like doing this. You ever had somebody do this, or you're doing this? Sometimes that can be to the other person that you're angry, you're frustrated, and so you're visibly trying to relieve the tension while you're talking to them because you're about to get upset. And even rubbing your hands together is kind of a sign of anticipation, like you can't wait for something. There's things that you do that you don't really are thinking about. It's kind of weird to think those things. Or your feet, like when you're sitting down, you're putting your feet up on the desk. That could communicate to depending, if it's your boss's desk, that may say, hey, it's a disrespectful, your kids, may put their feet on your bed, and you may not like that. But there's things that we do with our body, these gestures that are communicating quite a bit. Then we have posture, and this is, when I'm talking about posture, it's usually when you're sitting down or you're talking with somebody. And we've talked about this already, but like the body can be closed or it can be open. And those are things that they'll just pick up on. So when you're doing this, it just, for the other person, it's like there's something in between you. Or if you're talking behind a desk, it can just put something between you and that other person. So those are things that you want to kind of just be aware of, that am I being open and talking, or am I being closed? Because that person's going to pick up on that. Posture can also be something like if you're slumped, you're slumped down. Maybe that's just how your body, it changes over time. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could just mean that you worked at a desk. Or if you're really tall, you could not want to tower over shorter people. There's all sorts of reasons why you might slump. But typically when you're slumping, the person will pick up that you must be in a low mood. You'll say something like, hey, is everything all right? You feeling okay? And so like it just communicates to them, and you could say, no, I'm fine, and your face will totally confirm that, and it'll be good. Usually people, when you're talking to them and they're like standing up straight and they're to you, they're presenting confidence. Sometimes it could be like overconfidence, but usually when you're sitting up straight, it's projecting some confidence to the other person. Leaning forward, we tend to, associate that with being interested in what the person's saying. This isn't manipulative. You're not trying to be something you're not, but it's just something naturally you do. Also, leaning away from somebody, that could also say something too, like "I'm not interested" or "Next sermon, please." I'm not saying you're saying that right now, but it could be a little defensiveness too, like leaning back. So those are the postures. We kind of already understand those, but those are things that we can certainly, look at and try to make sure that it's saying the things we want. Breathing. This is one I've been learning lately. Breathing is not something that I would say that I've came to know by myself. It's something I've had to learn. But it's something once you know it, it's hard to like not know it and not see it. Like people's breathing, if you pay attention to it, it can give you a lot of information about their feelings and their attitudes. Now, if they're just coming off of a run, forget all this. That's because they were running. But if somebody's like rapidly breathing, maybe a kid who's getting ready for a test, or somebody who has an interview, rapid breathing, it indicates excitement, fear, or maybe irritability. Like you've said one too many things and they get rapid breathing, some anxiety. Shallow breathing, though, indicates like cool-headed. You're in your like thinking place. You're detached from your feelings. It's almost like, are you there? And some people can show you that they're in their thinking space and they're not really feeling much. Deep breathing, though, conveys the opposite. It's like if you've ever had somebody that's maybe you're talking about a story and all of a sudden like gets you and you start thinking about the emotions, you'll start breathing deeply. And so that's something that happens when you're talking about emotions. Breathing and feelings, though, go hand in hand. So if you're wanting to influence your feelings and feeling differently, you adjust your breathing. So if you're doing a lot of rapid or shallow breathing or short breaths, practice deep breathing because that'll help you to change, those emotional feelings. All right, you guys ready for group exercise 2? All right, yeah. All right, now this one's going to help us get ready for how we use spaces. So I'm telling you this on the front end because I don't want you to do anything that I'm telling you you should do. I just want you to do this so you guys can get an experience on this. So you're going to pick a partner. It could be the same one or a different one. So I'm not going to give you any more information about that. Just find somebody. And what you're going to do is you're going to face that person. So they'll be here, you'll be here. And I want you to be about 12 feet apart. Now these are, I don't know, you're going to have to guess what 12 feet is. I would say like the length of these chairs should be about 12 feet, right? But you're going to stand about 12 feet away, okay? And then one of you are going to ask the question to your other partner, are you comfortable? Now, I want you to be honest. You say, yeah, I'm comfortable, or no, I'm not. But let's say they say yes. The person who asked the question, you're going to take a step forward. Okay, that person's going to stay where they are. Now the other person's turn, and they'll ask the same question, are you comfortable? And if you say yes, that person will take a step towards you. Everybody following? All right, no? All right. Well, get a partner who is following, because that'll be important for this group exercise. Now, you're going to stop as soon as the person says no. Okay, so pick a person, any person. I'll give you guys a minute to do all that. And then you guys can go whenever you're ready. If I haven't started again, pick somebody else. That's fine too. So try to get through that. Say, are you comfortable? And if they say yes, take a step forward. When they say no, stop. Just one. It's not too late if you want to try this. As soon as it's uncomfortable, say no, and you guys can sit down.